And we are live. You are live. Okay. So, hello, everybody. I'm Johanna Burkhardt, the Soul Shaman. For those of you who are new to my channel, I am here live today interviewing the beautiful Angela Turpin, who was a student of mine who is now becoming the teacher. When we met, God, I don't even know how long ago it was. No, I do. You signed up with me in January of last year, of 2018, and you embarked on a one-on-one journey with me of really opening yourself up in these wounds. You were pregnant with your daughter, and you didn't want that cycle to continue of behavior, of emotional, of not diving into the emotional and living in the wound and living in the victim and living from that space. And you went on this beautiful journey, and I don't even recognize you anymore because you are a completely different person. And out of this journey, out of the flames of the fire that you walked through, you were able to create the recovery journal.
Yes.
And it's beautiful because it's Write Your Way to Recovery from Childhood Sexual Abuse. And what I want to say about this is that, you know, for those that follow me regularly, they know I'm all about taking responsibility for our healing and for the things that have happened into our life. And we live in a world where it's a law of attraction based reality. And so a lot of times people get triggered or upset or annoyed when I say things like, we attract who we are, where we are, or, the things that happen to us. But the truth of the matter is these things happen to us because we, at some way, shape, or form, before we chose to come and be humans, decided we needed to go through these things to help humanity, to help the whole. And so had you not had this horrific experience as a child and decided to take your life back and to take responsibility for your healing, this wouldn't have come. And because you've come to the other side of this, you now get to share the wisdom and the beauty and all the things that you have learned and transformed and opened yourself up to the world. And this is you embodying your own teaching and becoming the teacher and sharing it with the world. And you did it in such a beautiful way. So this is just a little intro, and I'm about to share this out to the world even more. But I wanted you guys to know that. And I want to say, welcome, Angela. And I am so very proud of you. Please tell us a little bit about you for those who don't know you, and abbreviated version of your story leading up to this.
Okay, sure. Well, I'm Angela, like Johanna said. I have been on this discovering myself journey for 4 years, and it was not until I got pregnant that the real healing completely started. And I started working with Johanna, and I just started ripping Band-Aids off my wounds that I thought that I had fixed, and I completely did not. Everything that I had ever done was only surface stuff the whole way through. I still believed that everything was external. I hadn't really taken responsibility for anything at that point. So I had gotten pregnant by someone that I hardly knew, because I was in a familiar situation that I had been my entire life. And if it weren't for that situation, I would have never started healing the way that I truly needed to. So I'm really grateful that I ended up pregnant in those circumstances, because it really did open everything up. My daughter now is 8 months old. Actually, today she is 8 months old. Their relationship with me and her father has been a wild journey. Number one, because I couldn't let go of control. Number two, I had fears and triggers that I was concerned about that were going on in his home when I wasn't going to be there. I couldn't control what was going on. But now currently, we were actually able to come up with our own agreement as far as visitation and custody goes, which was something that we were not about to do even just 2 or 3 months ago. So even now the relationship has changed drastically. We're getting along. I
I
just
want to
so
stop you
much
right
has
there though for a
changed.
second, if you'll let me, because here's an important thing that I think that in your journey of healing your own childhood sexual abuse, that when we have children, our children are our greatest teachers. So they trigger something in us. They trigger these memories that on a cellular level, these emotions that come up, and we call in these relationships for these reasons. And so what I want to say to this is that something was happening between you and him, whatever he was doing with the child, not that he was doing anything wrong with the child. This is not where I'm going, but those worries, those fears begin to arise in us, right? Especially when you were pregnant. So here you are pregnant with a little girl, and your mind's going crazy as you're healing through this process of all the things that happened to you, and the worst fears that you can ever imagine are exploding from that. And it's through this process of healing, though, that you were able to come into that neutrality, because this was a process, and you guys got to this point, not because of luck or because he decided, something changed in him. It's because you did the work and you came into that neutral space and you understood what was happening through your own healing journey. Right. Yeah. So like you called in him, even though,
yes,
you're like, why him? Why this person? Like, I don't understand. This is like for the rest of my life, I have to deal with this person. And it's like, it happened for a reason. Like, he needed to be the one, and Aubrey needed to be the one. They came here to assist you on your journey, even though sometimes we're like, really, but now, I mean, so much good has come from that. And you guys, in the dedication. So this is the recovery journal. She has this dedication in here. I don't even know what page it's on. I'm just going to read it. It says, "This journal is dedicated to my daughter, Aubrey. Without you, the healing would not have taken place. I am forever grateful." And sometimes these big events have to happen in our life for us to trigger our own healing. And here's what happens though. When that happens, you are given an opportunity. I have an opportunity right now to heal these wounds before my child is born. I have an opportunity to heal these wounds before I bleed all over her, but she's not the one who did this to me. Or I can blame, repress, react, ignore, not take responsibility for my healing and bleed all over my child and project all my fears onto my child and onto my ex and continue on. I want to bring that in because this is the reason for this. It isn't just for your own sanity. It's to break the pattern of wounding.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. When I was pregnant, I was actually in the emergency stage of recovery, which is where your entire life is consumed by recovering and by these flashbacks and these memories. And even talking about it, I would only talk about it with certain people, but I would talk about it all the time. And so if I hadn't decided to do that, I wouldn't have gotten over the major part of the recovery part of it without being pregnant. I mean, some of these emergency stages last years for people. And I really think that if it weren't for the healing sessions that I had with you and the timeline therapy and even therapy in itself, if I didn't have that, I really believe that I would probably still be in that emergency stage. And it's
what is the emergency stage? Can you explain that for people who don't identify with what that means?
Yeah. So the emergency stage is like all you think about, all you read, all you talk about is all about your sexual abuse experience. So you watch movies about it, you'll read books about it, you'll watch documentaries. It just completely consumes you. And on top of that, you have constant flashbacks, you have constant memories, you have anxiety, depression, just it's like chaos. It is like the ultimate chaos storm in your life in a certain amount of time, depending on how you decide to deal with it based on this
you know, it feels very focused on the wound itself. And I feel like that energy alone will bring more circumstances or more manifestations of that in. And I feel like that's when we start to see those relationships show up, or the things that, like, you know, when we focus on something, that's what we attract, that's what we create. And so it's almost like you create these circumstances or these realities where your worry gets validated. So then you worry a little bit more and it gets a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. So if someone is in that stage right now and listening to this or watches it, and by the way, you guys, for those that are on live, if you have questions, I can see my chat. So please ask the questions if you have them. Or if you do have them, I can always answer you after the fact, if you're watching the replay. But if someone's in that stage, is this the first step, something like this? Because as a healer and as someone who's a coach or a mentor, whatever you want to call it, there are some people that even when I start working with them, they're not ready to open that door yet. So even if they have the accessibility to a coach or to a healer or to a therapist, sometimes this is something that's so sensitive that they don't want to open the door. Is this the place for them to start?
Yes, absolutely. And it's the place to start because you don't have to share that with anybody. No one has to see that. And sometimes we can't even admit to ourselves that these types of things have happened in our lives. And if you allow yourself to write it, it comes out unconsciously. It just comes out because you're just writing. And so this helps it become easier to deal with, easier to admit, easier to say, okay, I'm ready. I can commit to this healing. So yes, it is definitely the first step.
Well, because I feel like a lot of times shame comes in. Like we feel ashamed if we have to go in and say, or even to tell anybody that this happened to us. And shame is one of those things that's programmed. I mean, even you hear religious people talk about like you should be ashamed of yourself, and shame suggests that we did something wrong. And this is why people with I know with me, with being a rape survivor, you know, you do have that level of shame that sets in. Like you feel like, what did I do to have somebody do this to me? Like, how bad of a person did I have to be to deserve this? And this is where we have to take back our power and say, this isn't my doing. This isn't my fault.
Right.
But a lot of us don't get to that space. What I love about your journal is this isn't just your typical journal. This is very raw. It's unedited, other than maybe changing some names and stuff. But you brought in an element that you don't normally see in these types of things. I mean, you'll see them in survivor books or people who write about their story. But when we go to do our own healing, it's hard sometimes because we don't understand where to even go with it. So what I really loved about this is I'm gonna give an example in here. Where was it? So personal entry number 5, right? She gives like her entry. This is what she wrote, and she didn't edit it. And I like that because you see the rawness of what is coming through, and that it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be eloquent. It doesn't even have to go anywhere. I mean, really, journaling doesn't. And then you bring in the questions and the space to write it, and you even give them a time so that. And I love this because I just started actually doing this with my healing. And when we give ourselves a structure, a safety structure to flow in, it kind of gives us permission to put our guards down for that space, because it's not always healthy to put them back up. But in the beginning, we need that kind of safety net. We need to say, okay, for 10 minutes, I can put my guard down and I can write whatever flows through me. This person did it, you know, and it gives you give an example. So it's like you are not alone. You're not alone when you're doing this.
Right. Yeah, I definitely wanted to share my personal entries. And even now when I was editing the journal, when I was looking back and reading those personal entries, I'm not even that person anymore. So to see how much I've grown since then, because when I wrote in those journals, I don't feel that I was as open about what was going on as I am now. So even just if you're afraid to start opening up, I feel like this helps you open up. It helps you start speaking that truth, realizing the things that have happened or the repercussions that have happened because of this abuse. And so even just writing it once, you can always go back to it again and write those journal entries again on your own, because you will open up even more. And I just want to say about the structure part of it, I feel like it gives your brain, right? Because we all have that resistance. We all have that ego that doesn't want us to start healing, to start taking care of this. It almost gives your brain the opportunity to say, all right, we understand what's going on here. We're going to write. We're not going to have any resistance, and we're going to allow you to do that. So it's like it gives you that why behind what you're doing, really. And that's always our hardest part, is that we have to be able to have the answer to the why, even though we don't necessarily need the why. But at the beginning, we think that we do. And I feel like that gives us the answer to the why.
Yeah.
So I felt like it was necessary.
It does help, because in the beginning it is more, you're still very much in that left brain, because the left brain is, again, where we're figuring out, like, why did this happen to me? What's the purpose of even healing? What is the purpose of even going down back and opening that can of worms? Because here's what I've noticed as a healer, and what I do is that the women that are coming to me, and you are actually one of those people. So my ideal client, just to set the stage, is someone who is a working person. So whether they own their own business or they are working in corporate, and they are in the beginning stages of their spiritual awakening, or even some people aren't even ready to call it that. So they're just coming into an awareness better. So that's all an awakening is. So they're becoming more aware of things. But at the end of the day, the real thing that we fear is feeling. We fear feeling. We don't fear getting in a car accident. We fear the pain that we're going to ensue. We don't fear breaking up in a relationship. We're afraid of the feeling of losing the person. Same if they're going to die. We don't fear telling somebody about our story. We are afraid of feeling the shame and the judgment. And so I attract a lot of people who are in this masculine, structured world of, this is how things need to be. And I'm supposed to pull my big girl panties up and put on a good face and pretend this shit didn't happen. And I'm got to go on about my life and not talk about that stuff. We don't talk about that. And I can't feel it. And so they're very guarded, and they're not in their bodies. This is a perfect example of oftentimes, and I think you mentioned this in there. I don't know how much you mentioned in it, but a lot of times you'll see people who are sexual abuse survivors, whether it was childhood or later on in life, they almost victimize their body, because they'll have more sex, or they'll give their body to people who, like, they have no boundaries, right? They're like, whatever, I don't care, do whatever you want to me, because they're not in their body. Their body is not a safe space. So they're not even in it. So they're not even feeling it. They're not anywhere close to it. And so what I do is I help people feel in a safe way, because it's when you face that fear of that feeling and you can integrate it, then it's not that the fears go away. It's that you come into more of a neutral state where you can be the observer. So for example, with you and Aubrey's dad, you are able to, and look, we're all human, so it's never going to be perfect, but you're able to see the triggers that are happening within you and not react to them anymore. You're able to say, okay,
yeah,
something's happening right here. Let me rein this back in before I spout out, or before I go and push it down, or try to pull my pants up, or whatever we want to call it. And so can you talk a little bit about the healing itself? Because yes, you journaled, yes, you did the work, and this is the creation of it. This is what happened when, by you coming through this process. But how have you changed as a person through opening yourself up and allowing this to be more public, and because you had to tell your mom, and you had to do all these things later on in life that most people don't want to enter into. So how is that whole journey of vulnerability and opening yourself up to this emotion and this wound again? How has that changed you? Like, what is a little bit of that you can share with us?
Sure. So I actually had to tell the father of my child. I had to tell my mom. I ended up telling my sister. I told my father. And so just being willing to tell them and open up about it, um, what the before it actually took place, it was the worst experience ever. And then when it was actually happening and my mom was supportive, I was almost in shock. And then a couple of days later, I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is really good. I can tell people just by having that support, it made me feel like it was okay to continue healing. It was okay to speak what I was saying. You know, just having that alone really helped me expand on my healing. So when I told the father of my child, there was no emotion. I hope that you don't take that out on me. Well, that's why I'm telling you. So I hope that it doesn't happen either. So I tried not to have any expectations, because the expectations of telling people, it will hinder your ability to heal. Because if someone reacts the way you didn't want them to react, it could end the whole journey. And that's unfortunate, but we just can't have expectations to that. And I know that that's hard, but it just you can't have them. But being able to open up like that helped me. I had to, the father of my child and I, we were at it in court, and I thought that he was going to bring it up in court, and that, you know, he was saying that I was unstable, and I knew that eventually he was going to say that this was why. I had to tell my lawyer, and I wasn't, to me, 2 years ago, I would have never, ever, ever done something like that. So I am more willing to speak up about it. And that has changed. That has helped me step into my power. It's helped me know myself. I trust myself better. And I don't have the same relationship with men that I used to have. So I used to be very manipulative. I used sex as a weapon because, like you said, you pretty much disassociate from your body. And so I don't want to say that this is like all men, but I was like a man. I could have sex with whoever, however, and it didn't matter. And I could leave the next day and not have any emotions tied to it at all. Now I'm aware that I have emotion. I'm an emotional person. I'm an emotional being. I am a woman. I have those emotions. And so it completely shifted into being aware that I am a woman. I have certain womanly emotions that men may not necessarily have. Doesn't mean that they're capable, doesn't mean that they're not capable of it, but I know when to turn on that masculine energy. But most of the time I'm not in it. When I'm working and stuff like that, it's totally different ballgame. But I have learned to
kind of balance the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've also have opened up, you know, in my eyes, now that this journal has been created, I have an Instagram page. The whole world knows, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm okay with that now. Before, I was not. Even 8 months ago, I was like, I don't know if I can do this.
Well, even you and I
in the beginning. Perry.
In the beginning, it wasn't even easy for you to go into detail with me. And that's why the writing became such, you've always been a writer anyway, but the writing became such an outlet for you. And having that structure that we created together to kind of have that dialogue back and forth to open you up. And that's another reason why I like this, because it's almost like you create this relationship with the person who's buying the journal by sharing and being vulnerable with them what was going on with you, so that because this is what breaks the barrier. This is what breaks that vulnerability and that guard. Because when they're buying, if you just buy a random journal, right, that doesn't have what this aspect, this quality that I love so much that you've added in, which is your vulnerability, your connection to each individual person who's buying this and going on this journey. So you're allowing yourself to come and connect with them. And in that process, you're opening their heart each time a little bit more and allowing them to do the very first thing that we all need to do. And that is to accept this for ourselves before we go and share it with the world, before we go and hire the coach or the therapist even. If you are afraid to even open that door, or maybe that door is not something that is financially accessible to you, this is something that for such a low cost opens that door for healing for them so that they can accept their own story. Because acceptance, being aware of what you're feeling, what's happening, how it's affecting your life, and then accepting it. Acceptance, surrender is the second step. And so this is the thing right here is they get to do that on their terms,
Right.
in their home, privately. And let me tell you, there was probably two people in the three people mainly in the whole world for 20 years that for how old am I now? Okay, so for 20 years that knew that I was sexually assaulted. But again, it's because we don't want to admit to ourselves, let alone anybody else, that we were so vulnerable or weak or we did something to deserve it. We don't want to even put that out there in the world. So we just don't talk about it. We just don't acknowledge it. So coming into that awareness and acknowledging it and accepting that part of your life for yourself and going on this journey, this is a highly recommended way to start. And so I cannot say enough about the way that you have written this, Angela, and the way that you have brought your vulnerability into it. She goes into a little bit about her story, and giving you that structure that you need. I opened this, so let's talk about this because it says personal entry number 10. And you guys, if you want to follow her on Instagram, I know that she's going to be doing some bringing this book to life kind of way, and question and answers, and really being there to support. So if you yourself have not been affected by childhood sexual abuse or sexual abuse in general, but know somebody who is, maybe you can forward this video to them privately and kind of open that door for them. But she says, the first thing she says in here is responsibility. I could have told someone, not getting help, letting my abuse control my decisions in life. That is huge. Keeping myself isolated and at an arm's distance, not trusting people, thinking my past is the same as the present. This is what we all do, right? But these are the heavier wounds. My reactions to triggers and emotions now, becoming a survivor rather than a victim. I love that, because when we talk about taking responsibility for something that happened to us, like childhood abuse, this is the responsibility that we have now. We can choose to hold on to it and be the victim and be in that energy, or we can take responsibility and take our power back. And that's what you've done here.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And taking responsibility for your actions after the fact is the hardest thing that you'll ever have to do, because that means that you have to accept who you are as you are. And that's hard. So, wanting to accept the person that you almost reject is not the easiest thing to do, especially in most cases, well, in all cases, really. We reject that child self that went through all of that. And so that means that if we take responsibility, we start accepting that child that was abused, that was helpless, that was vulnerable. And those are the emotions that we are attempting to avoid. And when we start taking responsibility, we just can't go back. We have to start bringing that child self into our lives so that they can grow up, so that we can grow.
Yeah.
So that's really that really is what happens. And in my case, I had been raped twice, when I had the flashback of the childhood sexual abuse, but I didn't remember consciously for almost 27 years.
Oh, wow.
So it would have been a long time. My friend, she had told me that she had been abused, and she's like, I'm telling you, we have some of the same stuff. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think so. And then all of a sudden one night it was there. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, that explains everything. And I told her what had happened. And then I didn't talk about it again. I thought I was completely okay because I just acknowledged that it had happened. And I think it's,
well, we disassociate when we're talking about leaving the body. We create every time a wounding happens or something is that we don't want to acknowledge or that we disassociate with or avoid or repress. It's like a piece of us gets removed and fractals off as a whole nother person. It's a whole nother energy. And this is what they call, when we talk about inner children or fractalization, it's the inner child could be you yesterday or last week. It's a piece of you that you are not ready to acknowledge and
right.
accept. And let's be real. We all want to be loved and accepted, and acceptance in all our forms is what infinite love means. And so to love somebody means that we fully accept them in all their forms. And you cannot do that in life. You cannot do that with your children. You cannot do that with a partner, with a friend, if you can't do it for yourself. And this is what you were doing by claiming responsibility and bringing that piece back in. And it's funny because when you open the door for the healing, you notice how that came back in, right? And that's showing up because you were ready to accept it.
Right.
You were ready to acknowledge it. This is why I tell people, don't go digging for it. When you open the door, it will surface. And that's a perfect example of how that happens.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Because at that time, I think I was about 2 years into my journey of discovering who I was and what I thought my purpose was. And then that's when it clicked in, and I was just like, oh wow. I was shocked.
I always tell people,
shocked.
Look at your life, look at your woundings, look at all of the things you don't want to look at, and then look at what you're passionate about. And you've found what you're here to do and your mission. Right. And I must say, you don't work for corporate anymore.
No, you know what? I have to share this story for anybody that is afraid to let go of their corporate job or is afraid to chase their purpose. I left my corporate job. I had no savings. I had nothing. I left my corporate job. I pulled all my money out of my retirement. I know I'm going to get dinged with taxes later, but it wiped out all of my debt. And so since I have left my corporate job, I've had more money than I did when I was working. So it's just crazy how that alignment works. And then, I get unemployment. And so the other day I was like, well, I don't know how I'm going to pay my mortgage. I'll wait. I'm not going to freak out about it. I'm going to wait. Then the day it was due, the last day that I had the opportunity to turn it in without getting any late fees, that money from unemployment showed up. Bam. Okay, now I could pay. Well, then I was, on Tuesday, I had ordered the journals and I was looking to see when the journals were going to show up. As I was looking, I was like, oh, well, they'll show up today. The guy is at my door delivering the journals. So just everything has come into an alignment perfectly the second I decided to leave my corporate job. And I left my corporate job for many reasons, but I knew that it was time. I just knew that it was time. And I knew it was time because I asked for a sign. And I asked it to be a butterfly. I want to see a butterfly. Within 10 minutes, I got online on Facebook, and I don't even know why. I wasn't even supposed to be on Facebook. I was supposed to be working. Okay. And I read this article, something that Ashley actually shared, and I saw it and opened it up.
Ashley
and
Becker?
Yes. And the logo or the website name was Butterfly something, and the logo was a butterfly. And I was like, all right, we're doing it. We're just doing it.
Full charge ahead. I mean, seriously, you can ask for, certain signs and they will. And that's how they usually show up for me too, is that they'll show up in the suck hole on the online Facebook world. I call it the suck hole half the time, even though I'm on there, because we start scrolling and then we're like, why did I get on here? What happened? Yeah. But this is such a small thing in the scheme of things. A lot of times we think of, our mission in this world, and it has to be some big grand thing. And we really get in our own way. And the simplest thing for you, and you and I have talked about this a few times, and it wasn't until recently that you hit the go button on it. But that's just exactly what you just said, is when we decide, when we make the decision that we can stand in our own light, and that we can share our wounding and share our journey with the world, and it's serving a purpose. I always say there's always a purpose behind our pain, and I couldn't be a shaman, I couldn't do the work that I did had I not gone through the ridiculous things that I have gone through in my life. And it almost, it's not to justify it, but it does show you that instead of them being obstacles or blocks or these stones that were thrown, they are stepping stones, and they're leading us somewhere. And they're saying that you chose to do this because you're standing up for a collective of people that aren't ready to stand up for themselves yet. And so you become that beacon of light. And this is why when we feel this itchingness inside of us, or these, and we don't answer it, sometimes these bigger manifestations show up, like you getting pregnant by somebody who is less than your ideal person, and choosing to go through with it, and facing the fact that you're having a daughter. And you know, this was during the time when I was doing a lot of the in-womb healing work, so she got to experience that as well. But going through that phase. And I want to say this about being pregnant, because there's something about that. When you are in your mother's womb, and you know, the first thing that a human body that develops is the spine, and the energy of the mother and the whole ancestral line is in the memory of the water that's in the womb. Okay. So the water in the womb has a crystalline memory, and this is getting infused into the spine and the bones as the child is being developed. So the freaking coolest thing about this is that you did this journey while you were pregnant, and watching the transformation take place in you, you were changing the crystalline structure of the water and your daughter at the same time. And that is an amazing thing. Like, you were one of the only ones that I've ever gone through from beginning to end during a pregnancy, and seeing that change. And it's almost like I feel like it happened this way for a reason. I feel like your daughter's going to have some really ridiculous, insane ability because of it, you know. But that's the whole thing. When we heal ourselves, we heal the world, we heal humanity, because we stand in our light. Two, we heal our children. Even if they're already born, we heal our parents, we heal the ancestral line, because we came here to break a freaking cycle. We came here to break a pattern and say, enough's enough. I'm going to take responsibility. Yes, I was dealt some crappy hands in my life, but they're not going to be roadblocks. They're going to be stepping stones. And I'm going to stand on top of my mountain, and I'm going to say, this is how you do it. And this is how I can help you. And this is how you can take your power back, even if it means you're doing it in your closet, crying, writing in a journal, because this is the first step in taking your life back. And so for that, you have done a huge thing for the world.
Thank you. Thank you. There is something else that I want to talk about pregnancy or labor per se. If I hadn't gone through this healing, labor can be potentially triggering for someone that is that has experienced sexual abuse. Because of this healing, I was not afraid to write a birth plan that said, I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I prefer not to have a male doctor. I prefer the least amount of people in my room, if possible. I prefer that the doors not left wide open. Whatever the case was, there were a few things. I understand if these accommodations cannot be met. I get that, but these are my requests. And that could have potentially gone to everybody on the entire floor that knew that I was in that room. They put one person in, they gave me one nurse, and that nurse stayed with me the entire labor. And when the other women came in that needed to come in, they introduced themselves. They told me who they were. When the doctor came in, it was a woman doctor. She told me who she was, what she was about to do. She didn't touch me without me knowing that she was going to touch me. It was the most beautiful experience that I've had, which could have been potentially triggering and re-traumatizing for me. And because I have healed and was able to speak up, it changed that moment that could have been really ugly, and it is really ugly for some women. So I really did take advantage of that healing during that time, because that really is the start of your relation. I don't want to say all of the relationship, but the physical relationship with your children, it starts right there, because they're coming out. You're going to be able to finally tangibly feel them. That starts everything. And if you don't have a good experience as far as your labor goes, that could totally create a disconnect. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And here's the other thing is, even though we cut the umbilical cord, you guys in energy in healing world, you hear a lot about a cord cutting and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing, energetically, there is still a cord between mother and child for 3 years. And a lot of people don't know that. It's like this invisible umbilical cord that's still there. And so the state of which you are in for the 3 years after you give birth, one of the things that we got to do and you got to do is the reason why it takes us 9 months to heal from pregnancy, getting back to your normal self, is you've had a whole nother aura, a whole nother energy setting up camp in the middle of yours, right? So your energy has not been your own. It's been influenced by another energetic being. We are energetic beings. We're made of energy. And so after she was born, I did an acceleration session on you, returning your energy to you and separating the two, which is an important thing. And, that you got to experience, and it was for her as well. But regardless, it is a close relationship. We are humans. We came here to have that touch, that comfort, is why it's important to hold babies and not do cry it out and to snuggle with them. Think about it. We are the only beings that come out and can't take care of ourselves. Right. I mean, horses, they come out and they're off and running, right? They get their feet about them and then they're off and running. We are the only beings. Why? Because we came to experience the physical acceptance, the physical love, the physical touch, that connection. We came here to freaking connect. And so your auras are naturally going to connect. That energy is naturally going to be there. So whatever you are going through internally, and this goes for all parents, even if you weren't an abuse survivor, your emotional inner state of being, your child can read it probably better than you can. And they are affected by it. And there is no mask, no smile, no falsity, no lie you can tell that will make them think anything different. So if you want to be the example for your children, if you want to show them how to be in integrity, how to live in their best life, how to do these things, it is by example. It is by saying and being vulnerable and saying, right now I'm hurting. Right now, this is what's happening, and showing them how to take responsibility for their emotions and how to process them in a healthy way. It is freaking being vulnerable. Vulnerable and emotional is the new strength. If you are repressing and hiding and pretending that life is okay, that is weak. And this is the paradigm shift that needs to take place in the world today. And by you doing this, you are helping other women do the same. And I want to touch on one other thing before I get on my tangents. But, you said something and it triggered something for me. And you're talking about your birth plan and how, you were able to do that. And I don't know if you know this or if this exists. So if anybody watches that is in the medical field or who works at a hospital or knows doctors, I'm curious. I would love to hear from you. When you're going through this process, is there a box that says, are you a sexual abuse survivor? Or have you been sexually assaulted? Is there something on there that they could do to indicate or to tap them off that there's something there, and then a whole nother plan could then be put into place? Is there, when you were doing all, listen, it's been 12 years since I had a baby, so I don't know. Was there anything on there that said anything like that?
Yes, there is. And you know what, before they ask you when you go to the doctor, when you start having all your checkups, I put no.
Did you?
Yep.
So it goes that deep where you aren't even willing to admit it to the doctor.
Yep. Absolutely.
So
that,
wow.
So that creates a problem, right? At that point, I hadn't necessarily started healing. Even though I did have the flashback, I still put no. So many women do the exact same thing that I did because they don't want the questions. They don't want the sympathy. They don't want the crying, the potential that they're minimized, that someone doesn't believe them. There are all these thoughts and all these worries that go behind it, that you will put no to avoid the conversation, especially with someone that you don't know, right? You don't really know your doctor.
Yeah.
You don't really know the nurse practitioner that you might be working with. You don't have that type of rapport with them. You see them once a year. I mean, in my case, I have never been to the doctor so much until I had gotten pregnant. So you maybe see them once a year, depending on your situation. So yeah, I put no. So it wasn't until I started healing that I was like, no, you guys need to be aware of this. And you need to be aware of it because it potentially creates problems for everybody. And it's not the doctor's fault. They may not know.
Yeah.
And so that's where the problem is that it's normal for sexual abuse to happen, whether it happened to women or even men in their childhood or as an adult. It's taboo to talk about it. And so that's where it needs to shift, is that we have to be willing to talk about it. And if we aren't willing to talk about it, we can't fix these types of problems where women are saying no, even though the doctor really does need to know. The doctor has to know.
Yeah.
And
that's so true, because we identify, this is the stigma that comes in, is we identify that this thing that happened in our life meant something about us. It becomes our identity, right? We don't want to be the survivor. We don't want to be the victim. We don't want to be any of it. So we would just rather pretend we're the Joneses and put on a whole mask and be some other complete another person. And then they don't understand why you're freaking out in the middle of childbirth when there's somebody touching you and all these things are going on. And that's a tragic and traumatic way to give birth, one, or two, to bring a child into this world, let alone anything else that we do in our life, right? Because this isn't the only place that this is happening. I mean, it could happen in your workplace. Someone, could touch you the wrong way or come from behind you. And it's not just, we are talking about childhood sexual abuse here, but this energy is the same for people who were just abused. I was abused, right? I was mentally and physically abused. Then you have the people who just went through maybe a rape. So the abuse is the core, is the stem, and there's all these different forms. And of course, this is for the childhood abuse, but there is a link below if you guys want to pick this up and have it sent to your house, and you can start the healing process. What I am going to ask of you guys, though, is for those that watch this, if you know somebody, if you personally know somebody that was sexually abused in childhood and maybe isn't opening up to it or doing the healing work, buy it for them and give it to them as a gift under this, on the side, or send them this video and say, look, you're not alone in this world, because that's the thing. We feel that it means something about us and we're the only ones suffering and struggling, and you're not. We are never alone, and you won't be alone when you go through this process. Not only that, but I highly suggest following her on Instagram and just having somebody there who is willing to say hello and show you that you're not alone on this journey, and what's possible for you by walking through the fire that burned you, right? Showing you what's possible. Because I always say this, what happens when you light the earth on fire, it transforms the soil and it creates the most fertile soil to grow from. And your life in a year has completely changed because of a decision you made to own it and go through it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's been the wildest journey, but it has been absolutely worth every second of it. Every second of it. I would not be here right now if I hadn't decided it was time. It was time to change my life. It was time to start healing.
Yes.
So it's been a roller coaster. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. It's been
Absolutely.
worth it because even just a couple of months ago, I had talked about I have a codependency with shame. I don't feel like I have that anymore. Not that I don't associate certain feelings still, but I don't have the ties to it like I used to. Not at all.
That's amazing.
So,
and
yeah.
It just shows you it's not that we don't ever experience these triggers again, or we're never faced with obstacles or options or opportunities. We always are. But when we step into facing the fear of that emotion, we then are able to step into a space of neutrality, and we no longer identify with what's being barked at us or projected at us or shown to us as our issue. We see it for what it really is. And we're like,
right.
I need to send you some love right now because you got a little bit of issues going on.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
this is
exactly.
not me.
Well, even when my mom shared the journal on her Facebook page, and I saw it, and I went, oh my God, everybody's going to know now. My family's going to know. All her friends are going to know what's going to happen. She's going to start. And I was like, woo, we've got some fear with that. And I was like, it's all right. It's time. This is what you wanted. And I was just like, all right, that's cool. I know that stuff's there, but we're not jumping down that rabbit hole. That's completely unnecessary.
Right.
Because eventually you know that stuff exists. You know that you can potentially be triggered. You know that speaking your truth causes other people to be triggered, and it may cause chaos. You have to decide whether or not you're going to jump in that chaos. You don't have to.
Mm-mm. And I do see you speaking about this more with other people. And so I am going to put that out there as we wrap this up. If you are somebody who knows of a platform where Angela could share this recovery journal or her story, and reach more survivors that are out there that feel like maybe they're alone, that maybe aren't ready to come out of that, the wound closet, I guess we can call it. So if you know those people, reach out to me, let me know who they are, and I can get them in touch with Angela. You can learn more about her on her Instagram. The link is in the description of the YouTube channel. And she is also the founder of asfreeasyousee.com. So I highly suggest that you visit that and follow her, and do yourself a favor. If you're suffering from childhood, if you're still in that wounding, if you're trying to do the healing, or know someone that is, take a moment and order this. It's a very inexpensive way to begin your healing journey. And this just shows you the power of walking through the fire of your wounds. It's not always as bad as it seems. You see, she's here. She's still alive. She made it. And she's better than ever because now she gets to shine her light. So yes, we go through it sometimes, but we go through it for a purpose. And what we find is that we were there all along. You found yourself, you returned to yourself, you accepted yourself and your journey. And because of that, you stand whole with your light shining bright, saying, here, let me show you how I can help now because I've been there. And this is what we're asking the world to do right now. It's just take responsibility, do the work. And it, at the very least, if you're not out going to go create something with it, live it, embody it, because that's the best thing we can do is be a living, breathing, walking example of the right thing to do.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. No matter what, it all starts at home, and it affects everybody when you start at home.
Begins and ends with you. So Thank you guys for joining. We had a few people who joined live. I'm sure there will be a lot more people who watch the replay. I would I would ask that anyone who watches it to please share, because this is a message that is hard to spread because people don't like to admit that they are survivors. So one share could reach that one person who needs it. And so please share the message and please pick up the journal. And I want to say, I am so proud of you, Angela, and thank you so much for allowing me to interview you and share you with my audience.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm so grateful. And bye, everybody.
Bye.